Ghana's fight for financial stability received a boost today as the government announced a preliminary agreement on restructuring its debt with international bondholders. Now, this significant development follows months of negotiations aimed at reducing the country's ballooning debt burden. The agreement, which covers roughly $13 billion in international bonds, represents a major step forward in Ghana's debt restructuring program. The specific details of the restructuring plan haven't been disclosed yet, but the government has indicated it will involve a simple debt rework without complex instruments tied to economic performance. This morning, joining me to help us understand this better, I have Patrick Abankwa, financial analyst and investment advisor. Thank you so much, Patrick Abankwa, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on your show this morning.
So we're going to be looking at it, looking at how this entire process has gone on from February 2022. I'm looking at the pivotal months and how the debt restructuring talks have actually gone between Ghana and the creditors. Now, as I said, we'll start with February 2022, even as we track back. Now, Moody's actually downgraded Ghana's credit rating from B3 to CAA1, signifying a serious deterioration in the country's perceived credit worthiness. So as at that time, what would you say were the factors that actually informed that decision?
So I will look at it from three angles. The first one has to do with Ghana's limited access to the international capital market in 2022. And that meant that it restricted Ghana's ability to borrow new funds and refinance its existing debt. This further strained the country's ability to meet its financial obligations. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we had the cedi depreciating, and that had complicated impact for the country. Don't forget, Ghana's debt is always divided into both the local cedi and also the foreign currency. So if we have the cedi depreciating faster than expected, what means that our interest that we are paying on this debt will be bloated because now we need to get more cedis, chasing the same dollars that we used to pay by way of our debt. So that's also a second factor. The third factor, which is also limited or related to the second factor, is the issue of high inflation in Ghana. And that's also a major cause. Inflation eroded the value of Ghana's debt and it's essentially making it cheaper to repay in real terms. However, it also signaled economic instability and began to reduce investor confidence. So for me, these are the three major factors that led Ghana to the challenges that we saw leading to the issue of downgrading from Moody in the year 2022, that's February.
Okay, so we also understand that in March 2022, Ghana's central bank hiked interest rates by about 250 basis points to 17% in a bid to actually stem the skyrocketing inflation. Did you think that at that time it, in a way, helped in dealing with the issue around inflation? Because some people felt that it instead stifled the economy, and that was part of that was one of the reasons why Ghana's economy did not peak.
I think that the central bank's intention obviously was that they wanted to reduce money in circulation at the time that they increased the interest rates. That's March 2020. And the intention was that this would discourage consumer spending and help to prices of investment. What it leads is that sometimes it can stifle economic growth, as you rightly said. Businesses are now less likely to borrow money to be expand or even hire new employees. And that also led to we seeing high rate of unemployment within the period. And that also means that cost of borrowing is very high for these businesses. And because of that, they are not able to make the margins by way of revenue over the long period of time. So when you add these factors together, it can lead to slower economic growth and job creation, as against the issue of just trying to stabilize the rising cost of inflation over a period of time. I always look at the longer effect of that. The longer effect of that is that economic growth will eventually suffer and job creation will reduce over the period.
Okay, so what about in April 2022 when the cocoa producers the cocoa producers parliament actually approved the EA levy tax? Now, did that in any way improve Ghana's financial position as at that time? Because we understand that the government was trying as much as possible to come up with different ways to actually improve its fiscal portfolio. So I'd also like to find out if that helped too.
So when government was trying to introduce this e-levy, the idea was that it was going to plug the shortfall of revenue that the government was struggling to be able to meet because of the capital market that we could not go. But we all know that the challenges that government faced with that tax was one, there wasn't consultative discussions with the people that were going to pay, which in this case were the Ghanaians. And that also led to the opposition party in parliament also raising a lot of then that brought a lot of noise around digital platforms or mobile money transactions began to draw back. So government's expectation of projection of taxes that we're going to get from that particular initiative were not able to be met, especially in the year 2022 and even 2023, even though we know the volumes that are happening on the e-levy market in terms of mobile money are beginning to rise again. At the time it was introduced, because of the challenges that government faced in implementing it, i.e. the noise around it, it was not able to solve the challenges or the problem for which it was brought in at the time. So for me, I would say in the long-term run, you may have some revenues coming through the e-levy. But at the time that it was implemented, the year 2022, it did not meet its expectation because government implemented it in a very negative way because of the noise that they face along the line.
Okay, so we now tie that to the efforts of the government to actually deal with the issue around its debts and the restructuring talks with the creditors. Now, I remember that Ghana's then Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta said that it will manage its debts without IMF's help. So as at that time, what internal or maybe external factors likely influenced that decision? Because, it was hoped that there would be some sort of conversation that would actually propel IMF to release funds at some point, but Ghana felt it could do it by itself. So in terms of what it said or decided to do at that time, did you think that the policy reversal caused any form of political or economic repercussions for the country?
So the initiative to avoid seeking help from IMF maybe have been or political pressure to avoid external intervention. IMF often attaches conditions, as we all know, to the loans that they give. And that can sometimes be unpopular with most governments. So the decision to put itself in the political limelight where it will be seen as kowtowing to international support. And you all know that in most African countries, including Ghana, one of the things that government upon government focus on is the next election. So once you go back to IMF, as against you using the same IMF to campaign in your last election, that was a political angle that they didn't want to go into that. But the eventual policy reversal, where government did seek IMF support, highlight the seriousness of the debt situation that we found ourselves and the limitation of trying to address it without international assistance.
Okay, so in July 2022, Ghana's parliament approved about $750 million loan from the African Export-Import Bank as it actually scrambled to avoid defaults. Now, of course, it helped Ghana at some point avoid immediate default, but what about the loan terms and the conditions? Did it address the root causes of Ghana's debt crisis, or was it simply a temporary solution with some long-term implications?
I would say that the Afri-Exim Bank alone was not enough to address the root cause of Ghana's debt crisis. I think long-term debt sustainability. It's important to always evaluate the specific terms of the Afri-Exim Bank loan, such as the interest rate that they were offering and the repayment schedule. and to really understand its long-term impact on Ghana's finances. I think that we were in a very deep situation, which was bigger than the amount that was given to us. We needed to get to a point where debt sustainability was now possible with a clear roadmap. And until that roadmap was achieved through the debt exchange program, that support that we got in July was not enough to be able to address the challenges.
Yeah, but we see that Ghana and IMF were able to reach an agreement later on in the months. That is still in 2022 anyway. I'm talking about that $3 billion rescue package in December 2022. So how pivotal was that? And how did that now give some sort of platform in the subsequent deliberations around the restructuring talks?
That staff level agreement that you mentioned in December 2022, for me, provided a framework for restructuring negotiations with creditors and also signal some confidence in Ghana's economic reform plans. The IMF loan itself also unlocked some additional financial opportunities for Ghana, and this immediate injection of resources helped to stabilize the economy and reassured other lenders of Ghana's commitment to addressing the debt challenges, because most of these debt partners needed to see some kind of a roadmap from the government of the day. So if you're able to partner with an institution like IMF, then it gives some confidence to these creditors that indeed some leeway has been given by IMF, and for which some structures must be put in place, which will give them the ability or the confidence that in future Ghana will be able to service its debt, even if the period that they went into an agreement with has been extended. So that agreement that you mentioned in December 2020 for me was critical, and that has helped to stabilize the challenges that government went through from somewhere February of 2022 all the way to November 2022.
So what about in January 2023, when Ghana actually requested for debt restructuring under the G20's common framework process? That actually did not include China and India. So people are asking the questions that, was it as a result for a strategic choice to actually broaden the scope of relief? That is why it opted for that.
I think that a broader scope of participation in the restructuring process increases the likelihood of achieving a more comprehensive debt relief package. However, we need to understand that the Paris Club, which traditionally coordinates debt relief for countries in difficulty, may not include all of government's creditors. And that's why the G20 Common Framework offered a potentially more complete solution to the challenges that Ghana was facing at that time, because it wasn't possible to get everybody included in the discussion. You needed to make some headway by way of gains to give confidence to the bigger creditors before they jump into also joining in restructuring the debt that they owed or you owe them in that situation. So I think that it was not possible to include everybody in the first discussion, but getting G20's common framework for me offered a potentially more complete solution to the challenge that we're facing at the time.
Okay, so let's now bring it home now. We look at February and March, February down to May 2023, when Ghana's finance ministry said that the domestic debt exchange closed at about 85% of eligible bond holders on board after actually 5 deadline extensions. What would you say were the key disagreements on the haircut percentages, the interest rates, the repayment schedules, and in terms of the negotiations, how would you describe it, and how pivotal was that also?
So it's a natural situation that there will be disagreement over the percentage of debt reduction or haircut, as we say it in Ghana, especially with our bondholders who have to accept a new arrangement. And that was a major challenge during the domestic debt exchange program negotiation. Bondholders naturally preferred smaller reduction, while government was still aiming at a significant decrease in its debt burden. The negotiations also likely involved discussions around revised interest rate for the new bond that government was offering to the investors, and also the timeline for repaying the restructured debt. Finding a compromise was the problem that both sides had to settle on a standard was not going to put them at the disadvantage. So the domestic debt exchange program negotiation might have revealed weaknesses for me in the global debt restructuring framework and a lack of clear guidelines for haircuts, interest rate, and enforcement mechanisms would become apparent during the process. So eventually, someone had to give in. Government had to now go back and forth in terms of the rate that we're going to give, the duration. And at some point in time, the domestic creditors also had to give in because government was not going to pay the amount that was due them anyway. So that then we now have to push government to settle on an agreement that will not make them worse off in the long run. And we also that the rate that government offered after a number of years in the program was better than the current ones that most of these creditors are enjoying at the moment.
Well, it seems as though it's not really an easy task for Ghana to have gone this far with these various measures in order to deal around its debts, either externally or domestically. But then some people would actually applaud the government for what it has been able to do so far, getting to this point whereby both Ghana as a country, the IMF and the other creditors are able to come to table to agree how to restructure the debts. Thank you so much, Patrick Bankwa, financial analyst and investment advisor, for talking to us at this time.
Thank you for having me once again.